Welcome to Satsang. So, apparently tonight I'm talking about addictions. And it's a subject I know a reasonable amount about, because like everyone else on the planet, I have an addictive mind. All human beings have addictive minds. Some might say they don't, but that's because they haven't really looked. We get addicted to different things. Some things are harmless, other things can hurt us. And of course, usually when the word addictions comes up, people think of drugs and alcohol and gambling and the sort of things that create harm for people in the long run. But there's lots of different types of addictions. Some people are addicted to midday television. Some people are addicted to reading the newspaper in the morning. They don't get their newspaper, they feel very weird. Some people are addicted to reading novels, science fiction, fantasy, romance, adventure, detective, all sorts of different ones. And some people are addicted to chocolate. There's a nice drug in chocolate that makes you feel good. Some people get addicted to heroin or amphetamines or ice. Some people get addicted to any form of adrenaline sport, anything that fires their adrenals off, so they become experienced junkies. And I've been addicted to just about everything, one time or another. I was quite interested in addictions. I started a magazine in 1982 called Addicts, which went out to all the rehabilitation centres and all the doctor's surgeries in Perth and anywhere else that had an interest. And the whole magazine, which came out monthly, was about different addictions, how they were being addressed, what was the cause of them. And so I started studying addictions. I then went and trained with the Drug and Alcohol Authority as an addictions counsellor, I think in 1990, and with Holyoke. I worked as an addictions counsellor for 6 years. Most unrewarding 6 years I ever did. The thing is, human beings do get addicted to things because it changes the way they feel. It changes their consciousness. Sometimes it's an escape from reality, which may be a little too harsh. Sometimes it may be that they just need to keep up what they're doing to make themselves feel normal, or even half okay. But the addictions are there to change consciousness. It changes something. They take the substance, or they do the gambling, or they take the drink, or they watch the movie or read the novel, and it takes them somewhere else. It takes them into a different consciousness state. And so it's, in a way, a form of medicating. Takes us away. Sometimes it relieves pain. Sometimes it relieves boredom. Today we have an Australian population that enjoys a great deal of alcohol, according to the statistics. A lot of people think... I grew up thinking it was okay to drink every day, because my family did. My dad did. His dad did. His mum did. My mum did. My other grandfather did. And my mum's mum died of alcoholism when she was 40. And so then we go to the extended family and they just measured everything by how many cans of beer it took to drink. So I grew up thinking that drinking alcohol was normal and that there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's what people did. And so I remember when I started drinking when I was probably about 10, and my relatives thought I was cool. And the school didn't. I nearly got expelled for it. It took a long time for me to actually work out that not everybody was an alcoholic, because basically that's what I'm talking about, alcoholism. If you drink every day, you're an alcoholic. That's how it is. And a lot of people would like to deny that, but it's how it is. You're medicating yourself with a drug that takes your consciousness somewhere else. But I don't think alcohol did a great deal of damage. I was what was called a high-functioning alcoholic. You probably wouldn't have known if I'd had a drink or not. But it made me interested in the subject. Why is everybody running away? What is it that's so bad that we have to keep escaping? Can we actually be without an escape mechanism? I found it's pretty difficult. And so when I see people who have problems with different addictions, I don't feel that they're bad people or that they're wrong. I know they're medicating themselves. They're changing their consciousness, and maybe they began changing their consciousness and it was pretty simple. It was a 1 off or a 2 off or a 3 off. And then it became a habit. And then it became something they needed rather than something they preferred. And it was interesting because I didn't realise there were so many different types of addictions. There's sex addiction. Some people are addicted to sex. I heard of the word nymphomaniac, and I thought that was just a kind of a silly thing until I actually trained at the Holyoke and actually met sex addicts, people who actually just had to have sex every day and they had to have it more than once a day. It just drove them. They were driven by it. And I mean, that must have put them in pretty awkward predicaments from time to time. And so in working as an addictions counsellor, first of all, we had to work out whether the people who were seeing me were interested in giving up their addiction, or they were just seeing me because a relative had sent them along, or the police had sent them along, or they wanted to appear in court next week and say they'd been to see an addictions counsellor and they'd do something about their problem. A lot of the time they were actually not that keen on giving up. They just wanted to be seen to be giving up. Because when a person really wants to give up, they don't need a counsellor, they just give up. But it took me quite a while to realise that I was pretty ineffective as a counsellor, because I was counselling people who didn't really want to give up. They wanted to keep using but pretend they weren't. And so addicts become very secretive because it's frowned on, and sometimes it affects their lives and the lives of the people they love quite strongly, so they become proficient liars. And one of the first things you learn in training as an addictions counsellor is that you do not believe a word that comes out of an addict's mouth, which is it makes it difficult to counsel them. But there's a certain amount of truth in it. The only way an addict is going to stop being an addict is if somehow they're incarcerated where they can't get whatever they're into, whether it's gambling or drugs or alcohol or sex. or they decide to give it up themselves and they actually stop. I don't think you can convince someone to give up. They have to convince themselves. And then again, I've met so many people who are addicted to something, and it's not affecting their lives that badly, but they're definitely addicted. So we have different degrees of addiction, different amounts of addiction. People get into this ice and they lose everything because it's so demanding of them. It's just such a strong draw towards it. Remember in the late 70s there was a lot of heroin around. There was a lot of addicts. Quite a few people I knew died of heroin overdoses. Not that they were committing suicide, but they had what was called hot shots. That's where they didn't realise the strength of the heroin they were putting into their veins, and they quite often died sitting up, simply because they'd given themselves too much of a dose. And that's another problem with that type of addiction, working out how powerful or how weak the substance you're taking is, particularly if you're injecting it. And so there can be a great deal of grief around addiction. And grief because people lose so much, and they can even turn themselves into thieves, stealing from their own family and friends to pay for their addictions. And so if people come to me and they want advice on addiction, I'll give it to them. But the truth is, unless an addict, unless someone who's addicted to a substance or gambling or something else like that, unless they really want to give up, it ain't going to happen. Only you as an individual can give up. Nobody can make you give up. That's not possible. You can probably blackmail someone into giving up, and then they'll do it behind your back, and they'll become very good at lying and very good at deceit. They have to want to themselves. And in a lot of ways, when you think about it, our whole society medicates itself one way or another. We're not very much into pain, so we do a lot of pain relief with Nurofen and Panadol and anything else that'll take away pain. The stuff with codeine in seems to be pretty addictive, so they're going to ban that at the end of this year. And January, you can't buy it over the counter anymore. You have to get a prescription from the pharmacy to get anything with codeine in, because so many people are becoming addicted to codeine and the negative consequences of that. So I look at Australians and I see from the statistics of how much they drink and how many legal and illegal drugs that the Bureau of Statistics reckons people take, I go, whoa, are we in a medicated society or what? So many people escaping reality, escaping what is to find some different form of consciousness. And being in the business of higher consciousness, that doesn't work. Escapism doesn't work. It keeps you in lower consciousness. You actually have to find a way to face the music inside of you, whatever's making you uncomfortable. Otherwise you can't play the game of higher consciousness. It's just how it is. Some people think they can take drugs and it makes them more conscious, takes them to higher consciousness. But really that's just a trick of the mind. It may knock the ego out temporarily so people get some kind of experience of higher consciousness, but then the ego comes back with a vengeance because it never volunteered to be knocked out. It was knocked out by a drug or alcohol. So there's an illusion sometimes that people are gaining consciousness by taking drugs. But really, if you're into high consciousness, drugs, alcohol, anything that kind of phases you, it's not a good idea. Because what works in high consciousness is clarity. Absolute clarity. And that doesn't come from medicating self. Any questions, statements, any challenges to this teaching this evening?